Good day everyone, I am Joel Araneta and today I'll be reporting the transportation sector. What is transportation sector? The transportation sector is a category of companies that provide services to move people or goods, as well as a transportation infrastructure. So technically, transportation is a subgroup of the industrial sector according to the Globe Industry Classification Standard or GICS. The transportation and travel evolution have undergone many changes. A review of the history of the transportation and travel shows that their evolution took 7 eras. These are the pre-industrial travel system era, the early industrial travel system era, the mature railway system era, the express travel system era, the automobile-based travel system era, the modern tourism travel system era, and the post-mobility adjustment era. So we will discuss first the pre-industrial travel system era. So this was the period before the widespread of industrialization in Europe and North America. It was before the development of railways in the two continents. These were few common carriers. There were almost no regularly scheduled transportation services. There was a little travel, and travelers made their own arrangement with the suppliers. It was the era of stagecoach and Whiteside Inn, and only few people had the money and the reason to travel. So as we can see in the picture, the performance of pre-industrial means of transportation, we have walking, second riding on a camel, and the third one is sailing. Okay, the next one, the early industrial travel system era. So on this era, road improvements such as railways, canal, and steamship services were brought about due to the rapid industrialization and advances in transportation technology. So common carriers came into an existence, began to offer regularly scheduled transportation services. Then travel increased because more people who had money to travel. So as we can see in the picture that provided, there is an improvement compared to the pre-industrial era. So on this era, it was already introduced the transportation services as what we see in the picture. So next one, we have the mature railway system era. So on this era, it was already characterized by railways which expanded their operation by running hotels, providing other travel-related services. The railways began to market their services more aggressively, and there were also travel agencies and tour companies were formed. So Thomas Cook is an innovator in this field. During this era, he began his company's activities in the United Kingdom in 1840. So as we can see in the picture, there is already a big improvement in means of transportation. They have already the railway trains. So the next, we have the express travel system era. Okay, during this era, the express travel increased. Then trains and other form of transportation did not stop at the very station of our terminal, but only at the major ones. And also this increased the speed of travel and encouraged more travel than before. And the next, we have the automobile-based travel system. Okay, in this era, this influence of the private-owned automobile was enhanced in North America and Europe from the 1920s onward. So motorways, interstate highways, and other track highways were developed in the later half of this era, which was from 1920 to 1974. Then the automobile was predominant over other travel modes from 1920 to 1945. So as what we can see in the picture, in this era, it was already introduced the first automobile and the motorways. So next, we have the modern tourism travel system era. So it starts in 1945 to 1974. The car ownership continued to grow at a fast rate, mainly at the expense of long-distance rail travel. So mass air travel was another post of a World War II occurrence, the introduction of ID-bodied jets in the 1970s greatly increased air travel. The mass tourism philosophy and marketing approaches were prevalent during the 1950s and 1960s. So on this era, as we can see in the picture, it was first introduced the car and the jet that can travel by air. Lastly, we have the post-mobility adjustment era. This era began in 1973 to 1974 as a result of the oil embargo generated by the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries or OPEC and the resulting increase in fuel price. The events of the energy crisis basically exchanged the travel patterns throughout the world. As we can see in the picture, it was already introduced here the new modern transportation by land and by air. Next, the historical development of transport system. The desire to travel is stimulated with the improvement in transportation. So in before World War I, it took 7 days for travelers to go from coast to coast by steam locomotive. And by 1950, travelers could complete the journey in 2.5 days by train. And in 1938, an airplane with a speed of 400 miles an hour made possible non-stop coast-to-coast flight of less than 8 hours. And in 1950, travel time from coast to coast was lessened to 4 hours. And at the present, the Concorde can make a flight in 2.5 hours. So as what we can see in the picture, it shows here the improvement of transportation mode and speed miles per hour in year 600 BC to 1970. Next, we have the selection of transportation mode. So in transportation modes, there are many reasons why people select one transportation mode over another for their business and pleasure trips. The most common reasons are cost, traveling time, safety, convenience, comfort, availability, frequency of trips, ground services, terminal facilities, location, status, prestige, departure, and arrival times. And people belonging to the different travel segment have a different value of perception. Okay, the first one, we have the functional. So the functional utility of a mode, it is expected performance for a specific purpose. Then the second is aesthetic emotional, and it is related to such as aspect as fear, social concerns, style, luxury, comfort, and other personal feelings that the form of transportation might evoke. The third, we have the social organizational, and it shows that the frequent users of a certain kind of a transportation are stereotyped according to their sex, racial origin, income, price, cost, and education. Then fourth, we have the situational, and it refers how conveniently located the particular mode of a transportation and its terminal facilities are for the travelers. Then the last one, the fifth one, the curiosity, and it refers to the travelers' perceived need to do something new and different. So in selecting of transportation mode, first we have the travel by train. So train encouraged travel within the United States, Canada, and Europe in 19th and the early 20th centuries. The reason why travelers choose the train as a transportation mode are cost of price, comfort, safety, convenience, ability to get up and walk around, ability to look out and see interesting things, and route, and ability to arrive at a destination rested and relaxed. The popularity of the trains as passenger transportation mode declined with the advent of the automobile. Train travel continues in Europe and Asia more than in the United States, particularly for a long-distance travel. In Europe, the popularity of the rail system is increased due to the use of the Eurail Pass. So in 1963, the long-distance rail travel boosted, where it was the first class sleeping and dining facility. It was built by George Pullman. And in 1968, they introduced the dinner car on Chicago and Alton Line. And in 1869, it was the first intercontinental route in the United States was completed. And in 1971, Amtrak began its operation. And also in 1978, VIA, Rail Canada, was created, Canada's equivalent to Amtrak. And the second one, we have travel by ship. So travels by ship become prominent in the middle of the 19th century, just as automobile led to the demise of the train. The introduction of a jet airplanes precipitated the rapid decline in the use of ship as a scheduled passenger transportation mode. Cruise ship took place of regularly scheduled passenger ships. The fly cruise concept introduced in the early 1970s increased the number of cruise passengers. The modern era for a traveler is characterized by the use of ships, hovercrafts, steamers, and riverboats for cruising and carrying. Next, we have travel by automobile and travel by bus or motor coach. So travel by automobile, it was introduced of the automobile, resulted in decline of the popularity of the train in several developed countries. The use is automobile has increased in North America, Europe, and in Asia. Car rentals and recreational vehicles are two important aspects of automobile travel. The introduction of the fly-drive concept stimulated the growth of the car rental industry. The automobile stimulated tourism by creating attraction as along tourist routes made accessibly by automobiles, like for example, are homes of historical figures, scenic areas, and historic shrines and monuments. And then next, we have travel by bus or motor coach. So travel by bus or motor coach, it is the most economical form of transportation in terms of fuel costs, but for long distances, it still has the advantage of being time-consuming compared to the air transportation. So the bus provides intercity passenger transportation services as well as charger and tour services. And the last one, we have the travel by air. So travel by air, the airplane has taken over as the major international and intercontinental transportation mode in the post-World War II era. It is also predominated among the common carriers in domestic transportation in the United States and Canada. It is charter flights since their introduction have become increasingly significant as vacational travel modes, particularly in Europe. It starts on December 17, 1903 by Wright Brothers, and in 1927, developed regularly scheduled passenger trips between New York and Boston, and the late 1950s and 1060s commercial jets were introduced. Airline regulations. So airline regulations, international tourism requires a system of international air transportation. The system requires negotiation among nations and carriers in the form of bilateral agreements. Governments throughout the world have agreed that a completed free market for international air travel is not possible. So the Chicago Convention in 1944 and the Bermuda Agreement of 1946 marked the beginning of continuous dialogue about various freedom of the air. The ninth freedom of the air Bermuda Triangle. Nine, it is just my mistake. So when we say the freedom of the air, it is the freedom to carry traffic between two domestic points in the foreign country on a flight that either originated in or destined for a carrier's home country, also refers to as cabotage or privileges. First freedom, the freedom to overfly a foreign country from a home country en route to another without landing. It is also called transit freedom. With the end of the Cold War, the first freedom is widely available across the world, but countries such as Russia often limit the transit freedom to a few carriers. And the second freedom, the freedom to stop in a foreign country for a technical refueling purposes only. A flight from a home country can land in another country for purposes other than carrying passengers, such as refueling, maintenance, or emergencies. The third and the fourth freedoms are the basis for direct commercial services, providing the rights to load and unload passengers, mail and freight in another countries. They are commonly reciprocal agreements implying that the two involved countries will open commercial services to their respective carriers simultaneously. The fifth freedom is a type right to carry from the third country to the second country. Then the sixth freedom, the unofficial freedom to carry traffic between two foreign countries via the carrier's home country by combining third and fourth freedom. Not formally part of the original 1944 convention, it refers to the right to carry passengers between two countries through an airport in the home country. With the hubbing function of most air transport networks, this freedom has become more common, notably in Europe, London, Amsterdam, and the Middle East, Dubai. The last three freedom. The seventh freedom, the eighth and ninth freedom. So the seventh freedom, the freedom to base aircraft in a foreign country for use on international service, establishing a de facto foreign hub. So covers the right to operate passenger services between two countries outside the home countries. And the next, the eighth freedom. So the freedom to carry traffic between two domestic points in a foreign country on a flight that either originated in or is destined for the carrier's home country, also referred to as a cabotage or privileges. It involves the right to move passengers on a route from a home country to a destination country that uses more than one stop along which passengers may be loaded and unloaded. And the ninth freedom, the freedom to carry traffic between two domestic points in a foreign country without a flight continuing onto an airline's home country. Freedom is also referred to as a full cabotage or an open skies privileges. Among of the 9 freedom of the air Bermuda Agreements, only the first 2 technical freedom had been widely accepted. The 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th freedom are still subject to a bilateral bargaining. Then the 7th, 8th freedom are usually allowed only in special circumstances. The bilateral agreements were established to provide for an orderly development of an international air transportation industry. Use of bilateral air agreement was not enough to meet the need for a cooperation between international airlines with different profit orientations. So, the Havana and International Air Transport Association was formed to ensure cooperation among international members of the UN. The AITA is a democratic organization whose membership is open to any member of the UN. Through AITA, airlines enter into agreements concerning rates, condition of services, and routes to be given to each airline. And that's the ending of the discussion. I hope you learned something and you gain knowledge about my topic today. Thank you.